The American College of Cardiology is pleased to present this online education program titled, A New Option for Maintaining Your ABIM Certification, ACCEP with Performance Assessment. We are very pleased to welcome all of you today, and now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Dick Kovacs with the ACC. Welcome, Dr. Kovacs.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Kendra, and good afternoon to all the attendees. This is Dick Kovacs. I'm the current president for the American College of Cardiology, and this webinar is designed to give you an overview of the new collaborative maintenance pathway option for certified cardiologists who wish to maintain their board certification. This new option integrates lifelong learning and assessment with a goal of helping physicians stay current in knowledge and practice. And the ABIM and ACC have been working on this for several years now, and we're excited to finally announce it and invite you to start participating in it this year. We'll spend the first half hour of the webinar with a formal presentation about the collaborative maintenance pathway, and then we'll switch over to a more informal question and answer session. So we'll hope that you can participate in all of that. Our goal is to give you all the information that you need to decide if the collaborative maintenance pathway is the best option for you. So now I'll introduce and turn things over to Dr. Bill Oetgen, the Executive Vice President of Science, Quality, and Education and Publications at the ACC. Bill, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dick, and welcome everyone to our webinar. The collaborative maintenance pathway, or CMP, is designed to integrate lifelong learning with assessment. It provides you with an assessment option that helps you shift from a study for exam mindset to a continuous learning mindset. Because of that, the self-assessment programs are the perfect delivery vehicle for the CMP, we believe. As you can see from the slides, we have a whole suite of SAPs that are planned to offer the CMP in different cardiology subspecialty areas. ACCEP offers the CMP for cardiovascular disease starting this year in 2019. Additional SAPs are anticipated to offer the CMP beginning in 2020. Cath SAP is anticipated to begin for interventional cardiologists in 2020. EP SAP is anticipated to offer the CMP in electrophysiology in 2020. And heart failure SAP is anticipated to offer the CMP in advanced heart failure and transplant cardiology in 2020. The core concept behind the CMP is continuous learning. So you have to do something each and every year to maintain your certification through the CMP. The CMP asks you to focus on just 20% of the cardiovascular medicine field each year. This table shows the outlines of which topics will be covered each year. And you can start with whatever topic is in focus the year you opt in. For example, if you were to opt in 2020, the first topic of focus is coronary artery disease. If you were to opt in 2019, the first topic of focus would be arrhythmias. Over the span of 5 years, your knowledge of the entire field will be refreshed, but you will have to do something each and every year in terms of studying and responding to a series of performance questions. Now I'd like to give you a high-level overview of how the CMP works. We'll go into more detail a little bit later in the presentation. Starting this fall, a new feature called performance assessment will be added to ACCEP. A performance assessment will be relatively short in length, just 60 questions, and it will focus only on the 20% of the ABIM blueprint. This year's focus, as I mentioned earlier, will be on arrhythmias. Before you take the performance assessment in the fall, you must spend 7 hours engaging in ACCEP educational materials on arrhythmias, including scoring 70% or better on the arrhythmia practice sessions. ACCEP will automatically track the time you spend engaging online. And incidentally, as you complete the 70%, you will be granted CME credit for that effort. To be considered as meeting your assessment requirements by way of the CMP, you must take and pass the performance assessment each year. You will have 2 chances to pass each year. To help you understand what the CMP means to you individual, let's look at 2 hypothetical doctors whose current certificates expire at different times. Dr. Patel's current certificate expires in 2019. If she wants to use the CMP to maintain her certification, what does she need to do? First, she should purchase ACCEP, which provides her with 5 years of access to the material. Dr. Patel should start engaging in the topic covered by the 2019 performance assessment, which is arrhythmias. She needs to spend at least 7 hours online engaging, including scoring 70% or better on the arrhythmias practice questions. This fall, when the performance assessment is added, she should take the performance assessment. Now, interestingly, 2019 is what is called a no-consequence year. And this means that it does not matter if she passes the assessment this year. She just needs to participate. Participation entails spending 7 hours engaging in the arrhythmia section and completing the performance assessment. We'll talk more about the no-consequence feature later in this presentation. Starting in 2020, Dr. Patel needs to spend 7 hours engaging in the topic of this year's performance assessment and pass the performance assessments. Now let's look at Dr. Wilson. Dr. Wilson's current certificate expires in 2023. He wants to use the CMP to maintain his certification. What does he need to do? Well, the first thing to remember is that Dr. Wilson is not required to do anything until 2023 as far as the ABIM is concerned. As long as he takes the performance assessment and passes in 2023, he will be counted as meeting his assessment requirements. If you're a sports fan, a good analogy here is that everything is pre-season for Dr. Wilson until 2023 when his assessment is due. Between now and 2023, Dr. Wilson can gain experience with the CMP without the stress of achieving a passing score by purchasing ACCEP early. He's not required to pass a performance assessment until 2023. He can use ACCEP to earn all of the CME and MOC medical knowledge, that is Part 2 points, that he needs. And these average about 30 CME credits or 30 Part 2 credits per year for one who's participating in the ACCEP program. Now I'm going to hand over things to my colleague, Kristen Doermann, who will give you a brief demo of ACCEP and will explain the CMP in more detail.
Thanks, Bill. So hopefully most of you on the phone are already somewhat familiar with ACCEP, but I'm going to give you a quick refresher and point out a few features and functionality that may not have existed last time you used it. So as you probably know, ACCEP covers the entire field of adult clinical cardiology through 11 different topics. And as you can see here on this slide, we've got the dashboard of ACCEP showing, and you can see the first 3 topics there. We've got arrhythmias, coronary artery disease, and heart failure and cardiomyopathies. And if you were actually in ACCEP, you'd just be able to scroll down and then you could see all the other topics below. Now each topic offers a specific amount of CME and MOC credit, and you can see that amount listed on the dashboard for you. In total, ACCEP offers 160 CME and MOC credits, so it's a great resource. And now ACCEP really consists of 2 key elements, and those elements include educational material and questions. And you can also see on this dashboard that next to each one of the topics, there's a button called Chapters, which is the educational material, and a button called Questions, which is the questions. And it's totally up to you which one of those you want to start with. For the purposes of this demo, we're going to pretend we want to start by learning about arrhythmias. So let's pretend I click on that green Chapters button. So now we're in the arrhythmias chapter. And as you can see here, you've got a lot of choices in how you learn about arrhythmias. So you can learn about arrhythmias by reading. You know, all the icons up at the top of the screen under the Read label are modules of text that you can read. Now down below that, you can choose to learn about arrhythmias by watching presentations. So we actually capture all of the lectures from our board review course every year, and we put them in ACCAP. So each year you'll have about 40 hours worth of expert presentations to listen to. You can also learn about arrhythmias by listening to those presentations, and you can actually download audio files so you can listen while you're on the treadmill at the gym or maybe while you're commuting to and from the office every day. And then finally, you can download the slides of those presentations so you can take notes or just refresh yourself. So again, we've tried to give you a lot of choice in how you learn. We've also tried to give you some choices in how you answer the questions. So let's pretend you want to answer questions on just one clinical topic. If you had clicked on the questions button next to arrhythmias on the dashboard, you'll see this screen. We've tried to make this very visual. So each box on the page represents a question, and you can see how many you've answered. You can also see how many you've answered correctly and incorrectly. You can also filter these questions by their status. So if you just want to refresh yourself on the questions you got wrong and maybe answer them again to see if you could get them right, you could do that. You can also jump right to the questions you haven't answered so you can just work through those again. And now let's say you want to answer questions on more than one topic. You would do that by building a quiz. So you just go back to the dashboard of ACCAP, which you can see here, and you'd click on that big green button called Build a Quiz. That'll open up the quiz wizard, and then you can literally build a quiz to meet whatever your parameters are. So you can choose from study mode versus exam mode. You can choose which topics to include in the quiz. You can choose what types of questions. So again, if you just want to try to answer questions you got wrong to see if you can get them right now, or if you just want to answer questions you've not answered yet. And finally, you can choose how many questions to include in the quiz. So if you just have a few minutes, you can build a small quiz with 5 questions. And if you have more time, you can build a much longer quiz. It's totally up to you. And one other nice thing about building a quiz is that you get a score report by topic at the end. So this would be a great tool to use in sort of planning your next course of study. Now that we've talked about questions in general, let's talk about them specifically for a minute. First of all, just want to let you know that there are a lot of questions in ACCAP. There are more than 600, in fact. And you can see one of them here on the screen. So as you can see from this question, it's not a simple knowledge question. It's got a pretty meaty patient scenario up at the top, and all the questions in here are like that. And then all the questions are multiple choice, just like the ones on the board exams. After you choose an answer and submit it, you can see how your answer compared to your peers. And then you get a nice meaty commentary that explains why the best answer is best and why the other answers are maybe suboptimal. We also give you references to published works, and we also highlight the key point of each question and give you a link back to the related text. So if you get it wrong, you can go and learn more with just one easy click. Now, everything I've showed you so far is available in the current ACCAP, and you could do all of it right now. But then later this year, you'll see a new button on the dashboard, and that button will become active if you choose to use ACCAP for the CMP. And so you can see that button here in a salmon color. That's the button you'll click on if you want to see how much time you've spent engaging so far. It'll track your 7 hours. And that'll also be the button that you'll click to launch the performance assessment when it becomes available later this fall. So earlier, Bill told you how the CMP works at a fairly high level. Now we're going to spend some time going through it in greater detail. So, to participate in the CMP, you first have to be certified by the ABIM, and you have to not be in an exam grace period. Now, a grace period occurs when you fail an assessment in the year you were due. And not many people are in a grace period, but if you are, and if you have questions about it, please contact the ABIM directly. And actually, anytime you have questions about your specific certification situation or status, we encourage you to talk to ABIM. You know, ACC is very happy to answer any questions you have about the CMP in general, but your specific certification status should go straight to ABIM. Secondly, if you want to participate in the CMP, you just need to buy ACCAP. And as you know, your purchase gives you 5 years of access. The third thing you need to do to participate in the CMP is to spend 7 or more hours engaging in the topic covered by that year's performance assessment, which, as you know, for this year is arrhythmias. So this just means you need to spend 7 hours reading the presentation, reading the text, or watching or listening to the presentations. And you also need to complete all the arrhythmia practice questions and get a score of 70% or better on them. But you can answer as many times as you need to get that score. Now, one thing to note is that the 7 hours have to happen in the same calendar year as the performance assessment. That's not a problem for this year because ACCAP just came out this year, so you could not have done anything last year. But for next year, when the topic is coronary artery disease, you need to spend your 7 hours on coronary artery disease next year in 2020. So any coronary artery disease time you spend this year won't count towards your 7 hours that you would need for next year. Now, ACCAP will track your engagement for you, but ACCAP can only track what you do online. So if you download the audio files like we talked about earlier and you listen to those offline, that won't count towards your 7 hours, unfortunately. Just something to keep in mind. Now next, you just need to take a performance assessment in the fall. So you'll have 2 opportunities to take the performance assessment, and those opportunities will occur in the form of windows. A window will be a 1-week time frame in which you can log in and take the performance assessment at your convenience. We haven't set the exact dates of those windows yet, but we know that you're probably very interested in knowing that information, so we're hoping to get that information out in the relatively near future. Now, during each window, you can take the performance assessment at your convenience, in your home or in your office. You don't need to schedule a time because we're not recording you, we're not fracturing you, so it's really at your convenience within that 1-week window. You'll get your results immediately, plus you'll get a study guide to help you close any knowledge gaps that you may have. And then as Bill mentioned earlier, 2019 is a no consequences year. And so that means you'll be considered as meeting your assessment requirement as long as you participate in both the engagement and performance components of the pathway. But then, starting in 2020 and beyond, you need to meet the engagement requirement and pass the performance assessment every year to be considered as meeting your ABIM assessment requirement. But again, you'll have 2 chances to pass. And one thing to point out there is if you want to make sure you have the 2 chances, you need to make sure you participate in the first window, right? So within each window, you can only take the performance assessment once. So if you miss the first window, then you can take it once in the second window, and that would mean you'd only have 1 chance to pass. So if you want the 2 chances, don't miss that first window. And then ACC will take care of sending your pass-fail results to the ABIM automatically. You don't need to worry about doing that on your own. And your final 2 steps to participate in the CMP are just to repeat steps 3 and 4 every year. And again, that's the learning engagement and the performance assessment. And each year you just focus on a different 20% of the field with both of those things. And finally, in year 6, you would just need to buy ACCAP again to continue with the CMP for another 5 years. Now, we've mentioned no consequences several times in this presentation, so let's just talk about it in a little more depth. So as we've said, 2019 is a no consequences year. That's sort of a one-time deal. I don't think there are going to be any other no consequences year in the future. But in this no consequences year, as long as you participate in the CMP, you'll be considered as meeting your assessment requirement. And again, participation includes spending your 7 hours learning and engaging and answering all the practice questions with a score of 70% or better. And participation includes taking the performance assessment. Now, if you're successful on the performance assessment this year in 2019, it counts as a pass. But if you're not successful and your exam was due in 2019, there will be no change to your certification status, and you can keep participating in the CMP. Then in 2020 and beyond, you do need to pass either the first or second offering of the performance assessment to be considered as meeting your assessment requirement. So the thing we really want to make sure you understand is that a no consequences year doesn't mean you can skip the assessment. If you skip it and your certification expires in 2019, that will change your status to not certified. So if your certificate expires this year, you just need to participate and you'll be counted as meeting your assessment requirement. Now, with all this talk of passing, you may be wondering what happens if you don't pass. So again, in 2019, if you don't pass, it's not a big deal because it's a no consequences year. But then in 2020 and beyond, you do need to pass. If you don't pass, you have the option of taking one of ABIM's other offerings. So you can either take their brand new 2-year knowledge check-in, or you can take their 10-year traditional exam. And after you pass one of those offerings, then you would be welcome to return back into the CMP. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Janice Sibley, who will wrap up the formal presentation.
Thank you, Kristen. So what you're looking at now is more about the pricing, which we know you're interested in. So in buying ACCEP, the question really is, do I have to buy ACCEP each year to participate in the CMP? And as Kristen has mentioned, your purchase of ACCEP includes 5 years of access, so you really only need to buy it once every 5 years. You can see on the screen the purchase prices. This pricing model is at $1,500 for ACC members. That is a price that you pay up front for the 5 years of access. But note that the pricing model represents actually a 25% reduction per year basis compared to our previous versions of ACCEP. The total cost to participate in the CMP is shown on this screen. So there is a fee. It involves 2 separate costs. There's a fee paid to the ABIM, and you can see that on the left side of the screen with the various different amounts based on your status and when you are actually participating or paying them. That is an annual cost to participate in MOC to the ABIM. It is paid directly to the ABIM regardless of the MOC option you choose. You know, the CMP is one option. There is also the option of the 10-year exam as well as their knowledge check-in exam for ACCEP. So independent of which option you choose, this fee is due to the ABIM. On the right side, you see the fees that were just mentioned in the previous slide. And so that is a separate fee, and that fee is paid directly to the ACC. We thought we would finish up the formal presentation with a couple of specific questions that we know many of you are may be interested in. So this first question is, can I use the CMP to regain my certification status if my ABIM cardiovascular medicine certificate has lapsed? And the answer to that is no. Currently, the only reentry pathways for a lapsed certificate are shown below. 1, to take and pass that traditional 10-year MOC exam, or 2, to take and pass 2 consecutive knowledge check-ins also offered by the ABIM every 2 years. So diplomates in this category have to check with the ABIM for specific actions. And again, as Kristen mentioned earlier, if you have any questions or concerns about your status or about these 2 options, the ABIM is the best place to go. Here's a second question that has come up quite a bit, which is, if my subspecialty certificate, we realize many of you are have a certificate or holding one in different specialties within cardiology, such as EP or intervention or heart failure. If your certificate is scheduled to lapse in 2019, the question is, can I take the ACCEP CMP and then apply my results towards fulfillment of my subspecialty certification? And again, the answer to that is no. If your subspecialty certification is lapsing in 2019, you have one option available to you right now, and that is to take that 10-year examination. Both the knowledge check-in, or KCI, and the collaborative maintenance pathway, or the CMP options, for cardiovascular subspecialties are anticipated to become available in 2020, but not earlier. So if you are up in 2019, you need to contact the ABIM and take the 10-year exam to maintain your certificate. So this slide here really speaks to reasons that you might want to consider when you're thinking about your best option, the one that fits you the best for maintaining your certification. If you're currently certified by the ABIM and you're not in an MOC grace period that Kristen mentioned, then we do invite you to try the CMP. There are 3 good reasons to try it, actually. Again, that idea of the no consequences year. So if your certification is expiring in 2019, you can participate in the ACCEP CMP at no risk, because 2019 is a no consequences year. Plus, then you can earn all of your CME and your MOC medical knowledge, or Part 2 points, as Dr. Oetgen pointed out, that you need for this year. A second reason would be if your certification expires in 2020 or beyond, as Dr. Oetgen mentioned, you really don't need to do anything until that year where your certification is expiring. However, it's an interesting opportunity to be able to use ACCEP to gain experience with the new process without any consequences until the year of your expiration. So that's the second reason to think about it. And then finally, similar to the knowledge check-in and the traditional MOC exam offered by the ABIM, ACCEP CMP will offer you 2 chances to pass each administration year. So we'll end this formal presentation with just some information for you on additional resources. You can see 3 resources listed there. The most important one from our perspective, from ACC's perspective, is the acc.org/MOC website. This is on our website. It is a page which is dedicated to MOC. It holds a very nice FAQ that is downloadable that has a lot of questions that you might wish to take a look at as you're considering your options. It will also, just for your information, house a recording of this webinar. We'll try to get it up as soon as we can after this webinar today, and it will house that recording so you can go back and listen to this again at your leisure and or share it with your colleagues. Then the other 2 resources are again to remind you that we do have an 800 number and an email at the ACC, and we do recommend, if you have specific questions about the CMP, that this would be the group to contact. If, however, your questions are about your status of certification, when you are due up, whether or not you have other options, it would be important for you to contact the ABIM. And you see that particular number and that email down at the bottom of the slide. And then finally, what I will mention to you is that we do have another webinar scheduled like this on April 25th. If you're interested in that, that information is posted or will be posted on the acc.org MOC website. And we are also working on, and please watch for announcements, of a 3rd webinar which will be held in the evening Eastern Time so that your colleagues who may not be able to participate in these daytime webinars are able to do so. So with that, I will thank you and thank all of the speakers today. And we will go ahead and move to the question portion. And as Kendra at the beginning of the presentation mentioned, you should be able to type in your questions. So we'll go ahead and take a look at those now. And just give us a moment here.
Thank you. And as Janice did note, if you would like to type in a question and you haven't yet, the chat box is located on the bottom left corner of your screen. Simply type in your question or your comment, then click on the send button.
And Kendra, if you could remind us, I'm not seeing necessarily any questions coming in quite yet. Oh, I do see one now. Okay, thank you. They are starting to come in. So we have the first question here is about an individual who was certified in 1985, so before the recertification became operative. And he is asking, when do I have to start this CMP? Dr. Oetgen, do you have some comments on that?
So if you're certified in 1985, then you're in the grandparent status, which means that your certification, your board certification in cardiovascular disease will not lapse, and technically you are not required to participate in the CMP. Now, there is a requirement for you to participate in CMP in maintenance of certification if you want that to be notated on your ABIM web page, and that amounts to documenting that you've achieved 100 Part 2 points every 5 years, and also participating in and passing some sort of assessment before 2023. But even if you don't do any of that, your certification will not lapse. You will be grandparented in.
Thank you, Dr. Oetgen. So we have another question. This is from an individual whose certificate expires in 2021, and those of you that may have certificates expiring in a year other than 2019 in the future, this would pertain to you also. This individual is asking, I could start the CMP process in 2020. I've been participating all along. Kristen, I'm going to ask you to explain once again about those individuals who don't have a certification that is expiring in a year in the future, not 2019, and what their options are.
Yep, that's a great question and one that probably a lot of people have. So the main thing to know there is that you don't have to do anything until the year that your current certificate expires. But you're welcome to start the CMP earlier than that if you want to, so you can just gain experience with how the entire process works.
Thank you. So here's a question that I think is a really nice one. Are the exam questions similar to the practice questions in terms of difficulty? Are the questions written by ACC or ABIM? Kristen, I'll ask you to take this one also.
Sure. Yeah, the questions will be very similar to the practice questions. They're just written by a totally separate group of people, and they go through maybe an extra layer or two of peer review, but very similar to the questions that we looked at during the presentation. And they're written by ACC.
Great, thank you. And I can add a little bit to that, as we developed these SAP CMP, as we developed ACSAP and the other products, we are working to make sure that there is alignment with the ABIM blueprint. So we've worked very closely with them to make sure that the blueprint that they put out is indeed mirrored in the types of questions and the topics that you have seen during the presentation. So practice questions in arrhythmias will be very similar to the ABIM blueprint, as well as what we call the performance questions in the assessment. So if you practice with the questions, there is a good level of confidence that you'll be well prepared to tackle the performance questions. So we have a question about price, and this is if you want to maintain 2 certifications, either in cardiovascular disease and maybe heart failure, or cardiovascular disease and EP, will you have to pay $1,500 for each of those programs? So $3,000 every 5 years. Kristen, can you address that for us?
Yes, so that is correct, right? Each one of these SAPs is $1,500 for 5 years worth of access. So if you want to maintain your certification in 2 different areas, you would just need to buy both of those SAPs.
Thank you. And here is a question about different board certifications expiring in different years. So this individual is saying, my CV boards expire in 2019 and my interventional boards in 2020. So if I take the CMP this year, next year, I will have to take the CMP for both CV and interventional. And that is correct, that you would start, since your certificate for general cardiovascular medicine expires in 2019, you should make a selection of which option you want to use, and that can be the CMP or the knowledge check-in or the 10-year exam this year for your CV board. For next year, for your interventional board, if you have selected the CMP, then you would have to complete the module, which is the testing module for general cardiology next year, and you would also at that time make a decision about how you want to maintain your certification for the interventional certificate. And again, we anticipate that the options offered to you in 2020 would be the CMP option, as well as a knowledge check-in, and I believe the 10-year conventional exam. So here's a question about the number of questions. It's how many questions are there for the performance assessment, and how much time are you offered to complete that assessment? Kristen?
Yep, that's a great question, and I don't think we had that in the slide, so we'll have to go back and add that. There are 60 questions in a performance assessment, so it's relatively short, and you'll have 2 hours to answer all of those questions.
Great. And a question here, if I participate in all the CMP and pass all the components starting in 2019, do I need to take the 10-year traditional exam for recertification? So to clarify, this is a program for maintaining your certification. If your certification has lapsed at all and you need to recertify, then you would need to contact the ABIM, and they have options available for you. But if you take your CMP, if you opt to do the CMP beginning in 2019 for general cardiology, and you pass all the components each year for the 5 years, you are indeed maintaining your certification. As Kristen mentioned in the presentation, to continue along the CMP path, you would then purchase ACCEP again in year 6 and move through years 6 through 10 doing the same thing. If you continue on the CMP pathway, then you do not need to take the 10-year exam as long as you are on a valid maintenance of certification pathway. So there's a question here which is from an individual that says, what if I'm already signed up for the ABIM KCI, that's the knowledge check-in, but wish to switch to the ACCEP CMP? I will recommend to those of you that have that question that you contact ABIM directly and speak with them about that situation and see what options they have to offer to you. Here's a good question. If my hospital has an institutional ACCEP subscription, and you may know this as CardioSource Plus, can this be used for the CMP, or do I need to personally purchase ACCEP? Kristen?
Sure, that's a great question. You actually do need to purchase your own personal access to ACCEP if you want to participate in the CMP. And the reasons behind that are, we didn't want to tie your ability to remain certified to staying at your current institution, right? So subscriptions to CardioSource Plus are renewed on a yearly basis, and that decision is made by the institution. So we just felt like it was a lot cleaner to say if you want to use the CMP, you need to buy your own personal subscription to ACCEP, because that way you can't lose it due to anything that's out of your control.
That's great. And I can add to that, it's a protection for you so that if you do change institutions, or if for some reason your institution chooses not to subscribe to CardioSource Plus in, say, year 3 of your 5-year cycle, you are protected and you are still eligible and able to maintain your certification. So there's a question here. It says, so once our certificate is due for renewal, using this pathway, we will need to spend 7 hours, as currently, every year in ACCEP, and doing the test, and that's about correct. You have 2 hours to complete the performance assessment, but you could do it in 1. That would presumably be every year until I choose to stop my practice. So that's an excellent question. So those of you that opt into the CMP, this is actually, we tease around here that you're on this medicine for life. So you would do this every year. You move through your 5-year cycle. At the end of a 5-year cycle, you sign up to get the next 5 years, and you would do that if you wish to maintain your certification until you stopped your practice. We do have individuals that are maintaining certification even after they are no longer practicing on a regular basis, and I believe that is also an option for you. If you have questions about that, you certainly could contact the ABIM to understand more about status after you stop practicing.
And one addition to your answer, Janice, is that by spending that time in ACCEP every year, you're also getting all the CME credit you need and the MOC medical knowledge points that you need. So we've really tried to set it up so that the time you're spending in the CMP gets you a lot of bang for your buck.
Great, thank you. Here's a question from an individual that asks, if you do the 7 hours and the assessment, so we're talking about the performance assessment, and that's each year on the topic of the year, how many MOC credits will you get? Also, is the assessment timed? Kristen, I believe they're probably talking about MOC medical knowledge credits. Can you answer that and the timed issue also?
Sure. So I'll start with, is the assessment timed? And it is. You have 2 hours to answer those 60 questions, so it's about 2 minutes a question, which is the exact same amount of time that ABIM allows you to have on either of their assessment options. Now, if you do the 7 hours, how many MOC credits will you get? So that's a great question. Now, remember when we looked at the ACCEP dashboard, you could see all the topics listed there. each topic offers a specific amount of MOC credit, which is listed on the dashboard. So it really just depends on which topic you're in. So for example, I know when we get to next year, coronary artery disease offers something like 50 CME and MOC credits. But I would say on average, an average topic offering is about 25 CME and MOC credits.
And just to add to that, Dr. Oetgen mentioned that you could use this product for your MOC medical knowledge credits and CME. The way that the product has been designed, it should, if you do the engagement and you also move through the topics each year and do all of the CME and MOC credit, you should be able to satisfy the other elements of maintaining your certification with the ABIM. So in a sense, this is a bit of a nice one-stop shop for you, where you can get all of your medical knowledge credits, you can keep your CME credits up to date for your licensure, and you are also maintaining your certification, which can be in lieu of having to take that 10-year exam if you choose to use this pathway. So we have a question here, which is how long will the twice-yearly performance exam be? We have mentioned that the actual exam is 60 questions, and you do have 2 hours to complete it, which is very standard. As it's the same amount of time that the ABIM allots for their types of assessments and tests. I will also, though, interpret this question as perhaps asking how long will the twice-yearly performance exam be, meaning how long will you have to take that exam once that window opens. So the windows will be 1 week at a time. As Kristen mentioned, in 2019, for the ACC performance assessments, those 2 windows will be a week likely in the later fall and a second week in the later fall. We will be announcing those soon. Watch for announcements. We will make sure that we send out multiple announcements. But during that 1 week window, twice this year, you can sit down and take it any time you wish. And so because there is no requirement to sign up for a particularly testing time, or because you're not really being proctored, it is your option. And those 1 week windows will include a weekend time, so that if you find it is easier for you on the weekend, you are welcome to go ahead and take it at your leisure during that window. Note again that when you have a test window open, so this 1 week window, you have one opportunity to test. So let's say, for example, you want your 2 chances to pass your annual topic performance assessment. If you want those 2 chances, then you should make sure that you take one of those chances during the first testing window and the second chance during the second testing window. You do not need to participate in both windows if you pass the first time around. Keep in mind, again, that 2019 is a no consequences year. Dr. Oetgen, do you have anything to add to that?
The only other point that I would make is that each one of these attempts last 2 hours. In other words, you can't break up the your attempts to address the assessments. You have to do it in the 2-hour window.
Good extra explanation. So we have a question here which is very simple. It's how do I sign up to do the CMP? Kristen, do you want to give some directions on that?
Sure. So right now there's nothing you need to do. We are building an enrollment system as we speak. And so look for that in about June. So hopefully by June there'll be, and we'll let you know when this is, but there'll be a way that you can go and sort of officially opt into the CMP. But for now, you can just start engaging in ACC and it'll be tracking your time.
And that was something I wanted to emphasize. Those of you that have either purchased the new ACC that will be the CMP or are considering doing it, we actually encourage you, if you're going to opt into the CMP, to purchase the product now and begin that engagement. The system will be timing you in the arrhythmias topic, which is this year's topic, from the moment that you go in and begin your studying and answering practice questions. So you can get the engagement out of the way as soon as you wish and look forward to when we announce the performance testing windows. I'm just looking through more questions here. So here's a good question. This individual purchased ACC 9 2 years ago, and they're asking, is this the CMP version for ACC? Kristen?
Nope, that's another great question. So no, if you have ACCEP 9, that product does not offer the CMP. We just released a brand new version of ACCEP this January, so about 3 months ago, and that's the version that offers the CMP. So if you want to do the CMP, you need to buy the current version of ACCEP, which is just called ACCEP, right? We sort of have moved away from having the number after it because it's going to remain online in perpetuity.
Thank you. And here's a good clarification question. This individual asks, so if we choose the CMP, then we do not have to do the MOC practice performance credits, not the medical knowledge credits through ABIM. So we can clarify that. The CMP is a third option for maintaining your certification, that if you choose to do the CMP, that is in lieu of having to do the 10-year exam or the 2-year knowledge check-in. You have all three of those options available to you. So you are correct, I believe, that I think, and I'm not totally clear on this, but I believe that the ABIM does call the exam portion of your maintenance of certification program the practice performance credit. The performance piece. And that performance piece, it was formerly called Part 3. So you are choosing the CMP. If you do all of the engagement and pass the assessment, you are doing that in lieu of taking the 10-year exam or the KCI. So that part is correct.
Just in case the question related to what used to be called Part 4, or practice improvement, the CMP has nothing to do with practice improvement. And remember that several years ago, the ABIM determined that no one was required to do practice improvement activities for maintenance of certification. You can do practice improvement activities, and you can get credit for them, and they will count toward your 100 credit requirement every 5 years. But at this point in maintenance of certification, you do not need to do practice improvement activities.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Oetgen. Here's an interesting question, and we can clarify. This individual asks, is the performance assessment monitored? Do I take it at home? The performance assessment through the CMP is not a proctored or monitored assessment. So you may take it anytime, 24 hours a day, during that 1-week administration window that we've been talking about that will be announced. You can do it at home. You can do it from your office. You can do it on the beach. I'm not sure that's a great idea, but you can do it there. The only requirement is that you must do it you must be linked to a Wi-Fi, because you have to have internet access. So you could not, for example, do the assessment while you were on a plane. I would not recommend that. It does need to be from a computer that you are linked to Wi-Fi so that you're on the internet.
Right.
That is how the system works. Kristen, is that correct?
That is totally correct, but one thing to add is it cannot be on a cell phone, right? So the performance assessment works on a desktop, on a laptop, or on a tablet, where we don't want you doing it on a phone because we worry you might not be able to see the images very clearly, and we don't want you to waste time, trying to scroll around to see an image when you've only got 2 hours to get through those 60 questions.
That's great clarification.
And remember, when you start the assessment, you need to be sure you have 2 hours dedicated to the assessment.
Yeah, very good.
You can't break it up. You got to do it in a 2-hour shot.
Very good point. Absolutely. So you are welcome to take it at home if that is the place that you find most convenient and comfortable to do so. So here is one. Here's an individual that asks, can you take the performance questions, which is the actual assessment, during the 1-week window periods, even if you are certified just for practice or for extra MOC points? Kristen, I'm going to ask you, there's 2 pieces to this question. If you want to reiterate the issue of practicing, depending on your certification year, and then the extra MOC points piece.
Great question. So yes, you're welcome to participate in the performance assessment in years before your certification is due. You're welcome to practice it. You're welcome to try it out. And as for your question about do you get extra MOC points for doing that, the answer to that question is no. The performance assessment itself doesn't offer either CME or MOC, but you would get both of those things, by spending your 7 hours and then claiming the credit for the topic overall. But again, you're welcome to practice with the performance assessment in the years before your current certificate is due. And also one thing to note is that the CMP, participating in the performance assessment before your certificate is due doesn't reset your clock. In other words, there are no consequences to jumping in early. It's just a good way to see if you like this pathway.
Yeah, that's actually a very important point, I think, that if, let's say, for example, your certificate expires in 2021, and you want to purchase and begin working with the CMP, ACCEP CMP this year, you're welcome to do so, but it does not reset your clock, so now you have counted for that certification. You will be in practice mode, or I think we use the analogy pre-game mode, until 2021 when you officially come up for your maintenance of certification. And at that time, when you're taking the assessment of that year, then it will count towards your maintenance of certification. So let's see, we have another one here that is, if one fails the performance assessment in a given year, how long will one have to take the KCR or the 10-year exam? Kristen, I think you have the answer to this. If you fail an assessment with the CMP within a calendar year, then you do have to work with the ABIM to get back into another track. And do you have the detail for us?
Yes. I believe in this scenario, if you fail the performance assessment in a year that your certificate is due, then that would put you into a grace period, like we talked about before. And once you're in a grace period, you get sort of an extra year where you're still listed as maintaining your certification. But during that year, you do need to pass one of the other two assessment options. So again, if you fail the CMP in 2020 and your certificate was due in 2020, then sometime during the year of 2021, you'd have to either take and pass the knowledge check-in or take and pass the 10-year traditional exam.
And you can return to the CMP, but you need to go back to the ABIM first and work with them to make sure that you are passing and maintaining your certification. So that's why that grace period is interesting. You will enter into a grace period if you fail any of the performance assessments with the CMP at any time during the 5-year cycle, with the exception of 2019, which is the no consequences year. And at that point, you must work with the ABIM to make sure that your certification is being maintained using the options that Kristen mentioned. So we have a question asking about purchasing the new ACCEP, and again, Kristen, I'll ask you to give some instruction on where one might go to purchase ACCEP.
Yep, it's very easy. You just need to go to acc.org/ACCEP, and you can read all about ACCEP on that page, and then there's a big button to purchase if you choose to do so.
Great. And then we have a question which we mentioned before, but where I think it's worth mentioning again. This is an individual who's registered for the knowledge check-in exam this fall, and can they switch to the CMP, I assume they're saying, if they wish to. Again, we do recommend that you contact the ABIM directly and speak about your specific situation, and they can guide and advise you about what your options may be. So it looks like we are all done with questions. We have Dr. Oetgen wanted to make one more comment.
I just wanted to make sure that for those of you who may not be ACC members but are SCI members or HRS or HFSA members, the purchase price for ACCEP, should you decide to maintain your general cardiology boards, the purchase price for ACCEP is $1,500. It's the same for members of all 4 of those organizations.
And Dr. Oetgen, that's because we have collaborated with those organizations, and they are working directly with us on the subspecialty, the subspecialty SAPs right now.
Exactly.
Correct? Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think in lieu of not having any more questions, Kendra, I'm going to turn this back over to you to close us out, please.
All right, great. Thank you so much, everyone. And with that, we will conclude today's online seminar. A very special thank you to all of our presenters and, of course, all of our participants for joining us today. Today's program is copyright 2019 by the American College of Cardiology with all rights reserved. This concludes today's program. Thank you for joining us. You may now disconnect.